Hello. Welcome back.
Hello. Coming down the Queen bit with Peggy and...
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar with me, James Smith.
Me, Neil Brock.
And me, James Eatock.
It's a movie podcast.
We can do characters that fly and shoot laser beams and do woo.
Beneath all of that, it's all about friendship.
Playing the drums until his hands are bleeding.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each head off and watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone, then waffle about it for your listening pleasure.
Furthermore, if you want to join in and suggest a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share and review. It really helps getting the pod out there. For now, strap in, turn the volume up and let's go
Off Radar. I think you need to turn off Eatock's camera already.
Hello and welcome back to Off Radar, and it's me, James Smith, Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige.
Yes.
And James Eatock.
Hello.
Who we call Eatock. So this week we are talking about Captain America 1990.
Yeah, hold your horses,
so it's a film that, well, James Eatock suggested that I didn't know existed, but after reading quite a lot, it turns out that they've made a lot of versions of Captain America. And Eatock suggested this for us to watch. If you've seen it, I'd be interested to know what you think. I haven't written down who it's directed by or who's in it because I thought it was irrelevant.
Me neither.
That's so rude. So rude. It's directed by none other than Albert Pyun, who is very well known for directing basically quite unusual films that are somewhat out there.
C movies.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's closer to Z movies. It's he did Cyborg with Jean-Claude Van Damme, so that links back to JCVD, an episode we did previously. So there you go. So give him some goddamn respect, man.
Okay.
He's turned into Clint Eastwood.
And none of us... I had not seen this film before, and
see, I thought, like, when this was first suggested, I thought I'd seen this on, like, the BBC years ago. But then having watched it, I think there's another Captain America that doesn't even exist on IMDb that I must have seen. Because I definitely saw one before, obviously, the big Chris Evans style one. But obviously, well, if it was this one, I'd have been having nightmares about it for many years afterwards. So it surely can't be. But anyway, so yes. So my short answer is, no, I had not.
So it's funny, before you kick off, Eatock, I got to admit, I have not seen any Captain America films. So you have now tainted my opinion.
Oh, man.
So I started watching this and I was like, I'm going to stop and go away and watch the 2011 Chris Evans, not the Don't Forget Your Toothbrush presenter one, and watch that, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So anyway, I went back to this one and stuck through it after watching it in 30-minute chunks. I finished it just before recording this episode, so the last 30 minutes is quite fresh in my mind. But anyway, so Eatock, give us as a Marvel expert that you are, give us a little rundown of Captain America.
Well, I'd be happy to. So firstly, why I chose this is because, well, as we'll no doubt talk about, it's a very unique film. Funnily enough, if you so I recommend watching the film before listening to us. And do you know how you can watch the film? Someone just uploaded it to YouTube.
That's how I watched it. Yeah,
you can just watch it on YouTube. So given that Marvel own this, Disney own this, that shows you how much this film is valued in their eyes. You can watch it on you. You can't even upload 3 minutes of any Marvel film to YouTube for it being flagged. So the fact that this entire Captain America movie from 1990 is on YouTube tells you a lot. So the film came out in 1990. I wrote down, it was still a time when superhero movies were very they were still such a very specific style. Like prior to that, we'd had the Hulk live action series where Lou Ferrigno was painted green. We'd had the Spider-Man TV series in the late 70s, and that was like, silly and Spider-Man-y and stuff like that. You'd had in the 1980s, the thing that had ruled Marvel Entertainment was cartoons. So you had a lot of animated shows in the 1980s, Marvel shows, that really not necessarily brought their superheroes to light, but at the start there was the Hulk cartoon, the Spider-Man cartoon. The funny thing about Captain America, even when they released this film, is that he wasn't a big star in the Marvel universe. He was a comic book character that had, even in the 1980s and 90s, was quite a dated character. So Captain America is a very unique character that you have to handle a certain way. And oh boy, this movie does not do that. So at this point, Marvel is still trying to toy with how to make a decent film. I think during this time, they made a Punisher film with Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That there was a Nick Fury movie with David Hasselhoff.
I've not seen that.
So these
film.
are characters.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that exists. There was talk of a She-Hulk movie around this time as well. That with Bridget Nielsen, she was going to be She-Hulk. There was even a promotional photo you can find. Honestly, if you guys just look up Bridget Nielsen She-Hulk, you'll see her painted green in like a ridiculous costume. And yeah, Marvel so the funny thing is, in 1990, Marvel Comics, the comic industry was huge. Like comics were selling in their millions, and if they weren't, they were selling in their 500,000, 600,000 copies. Guys and girls who worked in the comic industry, especially artists, were becoming millionaires. To this day, some of the most famous comic book artists, or even like people that work in Hollywood, worked on comics and became so successful because you could do a comic and sell 1 million copies and stuff. So this is what is so baffling about this movie. The comic industry was massive.
He's going to be a national hero.
Stand by for move to
Not
stage
exactly.
2.
His name's a secret. Only Dr. Vaselli and myself know who he really is. We kept it that way to protect his family. For the rest of the world, he's just codenamed Captain America. He may not be Superman, but he'll be a living symbol of what this country stands for.
I used to buy a magazine called Comic Scene, and in this issue of Comic Scene, they had this like 5-page spread of Ninja Turtles stuff. You used to read all about the movie and like, oh, the puppeteering, it's all great and everything. But there was also a preview of this Captain America movie. It's like, and the things that immediately leapt out at you were, this looks really weird. Like he looks like he's leapt off the comic page.
He looks like my nephew as a 5-year-old dressed in a costume that he wears.
Halloween costume, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm dressing up as Captain America this Halloween.
He's an American Russ Abbott, by the way, Captain America. He is an American Russ Abbott.
Yes.
So if you don't know who Russ Abbott is, ladies and gentlemen,
yeah,
do a
I'm
quick
not sure
search.
If they get him in Brazil.
But Russ Abbott was a 1980s British comedian. Well, I say 1980s. He's probably been going longer than that, but that's probably is his height.
So, like all the Captain America story is pretty much the same, except for in this one the Red Skull is Italian. So he's in Italy and the Nazis invade.
It's very brutal at the start, I must say. Like,
yeah,
that's the thing. That's what I wrote down. Like the start of this movie is incredibly dark. You're like, wow, if this is what you'd see in almost like a modern day Marvel film, where they're really laying the foundation for a very dark or a serious take on a comic book.
Mama.
If you've ever read the comic book, Captain America in the 1940s fights the Germans, frozen in ice, pretty much this kind of a similar story here, is awakened 30, 40 years later. Obviously, he's awoken in 1990, and as we like to say about the Harrison Ford film a few episodes ago, he's a fish out of water.
It's like Forever Young, but with a uniform. If you've ever seen that film,
yeah, bit of Mel Gibson.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh God. Okay. Right. Yeah. That's a good comparison.
This can't be real.
It is.
Captain America now has to find the Red Skull, who inexplicably is still a relatively young guy.
But now has hair, Italian hair.
But now has hair.
And it looks fantastic, I must say.
You're kind of, I mean, let's be honest, the summary is as brief as I gave it. Frozen in ice, wakes up, fights the Red Skull. Along the way, there are more than a few deaths, which is quite surprising.
My favourite death is when Captain America's partner from in the 1940s. So he comes back in the 80s, ends up sort of being close friends with her daughter, who's played by the same actress. But the older person gets killed, sadly, by the Italian daughter of the Red Skull, who is like there's a bunch of models basically going around doing weird things. I think the director had a wonderful time with these models on the making of. But as they're zipping up the body bag, they're like, this is an appropriate time to let the daughter in to see the dead mother being zipped up in a body bag. And you're thinking, yeah, it's probably not the time you would let a family member into the room. So I found that very strange. The biggest thing about this film is the music is absolutely appalling. Like, I've never heard such bad music. And I checked at the end, there are 2 recording artists that contributed to this film. That is Ivan Neville and Southside Johnny. And one of the tracks, when he comes back in the 1980s to see his missus, there's a track called Memories of Your Girl. Memories of You, Girl. And I've put next to it, is this the worst song ever? And
this is the one where it goes, I'm all alone in a cold, cold world.
Yeah, it literally it states literally what is happening. It's like in
what is that? I know what you're going to say.
There's a couple, but like Trey Parker and Matt Stone have done it a few times. The guys who make South Park.
They did it in Basketball.
In Basketball, it's like they were literally running along the road. It's that kind of thing.
They did it in Team America, right?
Team America as well, yeah.
We're going to have a montage. Isn't that the one, I think?
Memories of you, girl. Searching, trying to remember. All these memories of you, girl.
I honestly think this film, if you put and I'm almost tempted to just do this myself. In fact, Smith, you're an editor. We could ask you to do this. Put a decent soundtrack on this film, and it would improve massively, exponentially. I think. I know we're going to hammer this film a bit now, but I actually felt it kind of had that sort of trauma vibe, like Toxic Avenger, where it was, and I honestly think that, if you look at the director's track history, there was a reason why it looked like that, because that's the sort of films he made. I actually found elements of it quite charming, and the bizarre Italian models I found quite funny and interesting, and
I think you kind of have to treat this film as its own thing. It's almost, like I say, comparing it to the modern Marvel Captain America film is almost a moot point. It's just not fair.
But then I kind of like that. I don't want to compare it with that. It is such a 90s film, and that's what I really like about it. I found that really charming. I found that quite enjoyable. At no point during this film was I bored. I know, Smith, you had to digest it in 20-minute chunks. I totally get that.
Which I also understand.
But I actually sat through it, and I just found myself entertained, and surely that's what films are all about. And even the bit when he does come back in the 80s, and some of the acting is a bit ropey, don't get me wrong, so he comes back in the early 90s, and the scene between him and his sort of ex, now ex, I suppose, who's a bit older, she's really good. And I felt a bit moved by that, and I was like, this isn't like a Troma style.
No, I agree. It's a sweet scene, but I couldn't get over the fact that her makeup was just sort of a little bit off, and I was just like, oh, I'm not I'm in this scene, and I get what you're saying, Nigel. It's not the worst written scene, and her emotion is really kind of real.
I feel so old and ugly, and look at you.
You? Ugly? Not a chance. Oh, Bernie.
But then it's
I thought it was lovely.
Your tears are almost melting the plastic on your jowl.
Again, but a lot of that stuff was because it was the 90s. They didn't have CGI. They couldn't do these big stunts. There's a fight scene where it's the darkest film in cinema history, and it's just someone just turn on a light, and it's just no, they can't be bothered. But yeah, all of that is just because I don't think the budget was huge, and I think it was just very 90s. But then if you compare it to say 91's The Rocketeer, that's a vastly superior film, and the special effects and everything in that actually look quite decent and still sort of hold up to a level. This film, I just don't think they knew really what they were doing when it came to stuff like that.
For me, the fact that with this film, it clearly takes itself seriously, and I think that's the issue with it. If it didn't take itself seriously, then I think I kind of would get your argument, Nige, but for me,
look,
it's
how can you
just
say a film take itself seriously when Captain America's like ploy is, "Oh, I'm feeling car sick," and then he's like, "Pull over." It happens twice. It happens once. Twice. It happens with the newspaper guy, and then in Italy.
Captain, are you okay? You hold it. Don't leave me out here.
I still think that they're trying to do it in a, like they're trying to make it in a genuine way. I'm not expecting Leslie Nielsen to come out and, like it feels like a spoof, but I don't think it feels like it should be a spoof. And I think that's the issue, It's like, although it's in the 90s, like the blood is ridiculous. It's like ketchup. The music you've already said about, which I totally agree.
So bad.
Like,
so bad.
It's so terrible. But like a score in a film, we've spoke about it many times, is incredibly important. But to have, you might as well have had no music, and it would have made more of an impact in some of those fight scenes. But it's got music back to back. It's like a musical because it starts with music and it ends with music. And then, like, is there a point in this where there's not been that little boy on a Casio keyboard playing while I'm watching?
It's like someone got a songs from the movies like CD that you kind of get in like a random media production course. There's 30 tracks and no one owns the rights to them because they're so shit that no one wants the rights to them. It's like, we'll just put them all in this film. It's fine. And that's what they did.
There's one thing that will appeal to Smith, as in, I would hope you would have seen this, but one of my favourite scenes in cinema history occurs in this movie where, and we're going to talk about editing, which Smith knows a lot about, given that's his job. So there's a scene, and you notice it more and more in the action scenes, but there's one scene, and it's one of my favourite shots, multiple shots, in a movie, where you can find it on YouTube. Captain America, they're in Italy, they're running away from the baddies on bikes, the models on bikes, as Nigel would say. And they're all like hot models. They're all chasing Captain America and the Sharon, I think it is.
Sharon.
And
I was going to comment on that as well. Fantastic name, Sharon. And it's like,
she was always Sharon Carter. I can't argue. That's Stan Lee's right from the 60s.
Fair enough.
So
Linda.
That is
Sharon
dated.
Carter. But yes. So the bike rushes towards Captain America and he takes a stand. The bike hits him. So he gets hit by a bike and he flips over. Not as in he flips over the bike. He gets hit by the bike, struck by the bike and knocked over, right? But he's Captain America, survives. There are 9 cuts.
There's somewhere later where he's like fighting, isn't there? Like right near the end on another rooftop fight scene.
Like the president says to him, "Captain America," and he turns, and I wrote down, there's 11 cuts.
Some of the ADR is amazing as well. Like while he's driving, and he's like, like they've
what's
obviously
ADR for our uncultured
additional
listeners?
dialogue recording. So they basically, if they haven't got that dialogue recorded at the time, they will record it afterwards. And but it's basically the way they've done it in this. It comes out like, they do it in a lot of films, but it almost comes out like a dubbed movie. It's almost like a different actor voiced it.
Like Flash
Gordon.
I
I still think one of my favourite scenes in the movie is, so in the 1940s, the Red Skull straps Captain America to a rocket and launches him, and you're like, whoa, what's going to happen? And the rocket is heading towards the White House, and the president, who's the eventual president, is a kid at the time, and he's got his camera and he sees a rocket headed towards the White House, and he takes a photo of it. And the rocket, for some reason, Captain America waits until the last 10 seconds of
it's like flown that whole way. And it's like, I should probably make this go somewhere else now.
I should probably divert this with my boot. So he kicks the thing and he kicks the wing of the rocket and changes direction. And the kid is one of my favourite. The kid goes, "Wow!" And it's just like, what did you see? You saw a bloke strapped to a rocket. You saw a red, white, and blue knob strapped to a rocket. The one thing me and my friends to this day will still refer to this movie was, I mentioned that Comic Scene magazine I had at the beginning of the podcast, and when you had this pictorial on this Captain America, it's like, oh, they're making Captain America, and there was a double page spread of Captain America getting ready to throw his shield, and I turned to my mates, I'll never forget this, we're at school, and I was like, has he got a rubber ear? For some, and it's true, like years later, the internet happens, you find out, yes, the costume department decided we're not going to have his actual ear go through the Captain America mask. We're going to give him a fake rubber ear. So Captain America's costume has 2 fake rubber ears. But it looks like a rubber ear. I mean, if you carefully look at it, it's like, he's got his Captain Rubber ears. Just talking about the cast quickly. Ned Beatty deserves better than this. Like, Ned Beatty was in Deliverance. He's been in so many good movies, and he's like a sidekick who, thankfully for his career, dies.
He's a newspaper guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he dies, like, thankfully halfway through this movie. He doesn't have to be in it because God knows what his role would have been at the end. And yeah, the problem I had with the guy playing Captain America, and I just wrote down, he has a silly face.
Stop it right now!
Sharon, calm down.
The trick with writing Captain America is you have to have his all-American apple pie, all that stuff. You have to have his ideals dated, right? You have to bring him into the present time and have his ideals dated. But then when it matters most, those ideals prove beneficial. Again, that's what they did in the recent Marvel films. It's that Captain America does no wrong, but then when there needs to be right, he does it right. And it's just like, oh, that's why we have the all-American Avenger on our team. The problem with this film is there's no irony to there's no, it's just like, oh no, Captain America's come and we're all going to celebrate this Muppet running around. It just, oh God, maybe I'm going to lower my rating again, but yeah, it's just shit.
It is.
Firstly, Sharon, although the ridiculous name, which is in fact based on the comic book, I thought she was half decent. I thought she was like a progressive, female, like in an era where a lot of female cast members were just like eye candy or just like irrelevant. I actually thought she was quite positive in some instances during the film. Aside from the fact, like, her mum has just died and her dad is like in hospital and she's like, oh, I'm just going to go to Italy with this random bloke and be like,
dressed up as a random bloke dressed up as a flag.
But yeah, I thought it was a bit random. But I actually thought her character was quite good. I particularly enjoyed their push bike escape where he says, hold on, Sharon, this bike has no brakes, and then they like ride it into the sea, which is just off of a cliff edge, which I've actually written is bike escape amazing. So I enjoyed that bit especially. But yeah, I thought she was quite good, although I kind of missed the bit when suddenly the president knew what her name was and was like, oh, there's Sharon. And
yeah, that bit's so, I wrote that down as well. He just goes Sharon. It's like, wait, what?
How does
he have
he
an
know
interaction
Sharon?
we missed?
But to sum up, and there's a bit like at the end when Captain America goes like, heads up, and then just like looks at the camera.
Heads up.
I saw a very poignant bit in the credits which just said mainly filmed in Yugoslavia, which I think sums up this film. So I think that's part of the reason. Much like Yugoslavia, this film perhaps, well, it did exist once, but maybe it shouldn't anymore. Captain America, right? The budget for that film was $3 million. You compare that to The Rocketeer that I mentioned earlier. The budget for that film was $35 to $40 million. Now, are you telling me that Marvel seriously thought, right, we're going to make this film and we're going to make it good? The budget for The Punisher was $9 million, and that was obviously a year earlier as well. So it kind of makes you see that they just didn't really invest in it at all. And obviously you can see that, unfortunately, if you watch the film as well.
Yeah, I still think even with a low budget, you can make a decent film. Like there's a scene, you know, when they jump out the plane, for example, and it's clearly just in a studio.
Oh yeah,
and,
like pats him on the back, he's just like leaning out the door.
There's plenty of ways you can actually make that look a little bit more believable by shaking the camera a little bit, or, you know, like putting a bit more smoke in, but they just didn't try. But yeah, ratings. Okay, so E-Talk, let's go to you first then.
So yeah, I give this movie 2 out of 10.
What did I give Tenet? I gave Tenet 2 out of 10. I will give this 2.5 out of 10 because I think it's better than Tenet.
Better than Tenet? Oh my goodness.
It's funny you say that.
Hang on. Your rating's higher than mine.
Well, I'm actually going to give it, because I actually found a lot of it enjoyable. I really did. And I'm almost thinking if someone sorted the music out, I'm almost going to discount the music because that would probably take it down to a very low score. But I'm actually going to give it a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Just because I never knew there was an American Russ Abbott. Just because Sharon is going on holiday and doing whatever she likes and speaks Italian, so balls to the lot of yeah, because of random Italian models and because the Red Skull had a slick back Italian hair. And I mean, just brilliant.
Well, look, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you want to get in touch, why don't you email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. You can tweet us at offradarpodcast, or you can follow us on Facebook at offradarpod. And let us know what you think about that film or any of the films we've reviewed so far. Also, just do us a favour and please share and subscribe and review this episode. It really does help getting the pod out there. And we really appreciate you listening to our voices. So, next week we are reviewing and discussing and giving our views about Mrs. Doubtfire. So, watch the film before next week and we'll speak to you next time on Off Radar.